Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Gray, and welcome to Your City, Your County. We're very happy to have you with us today, and our guest is Jared Heyn. He is the Algoma City Administrator, and it's very nice to have you with us. This is a first for you to be on this program. How long have you been here in Algoma?
I've been here since the month of February of this year.
Okay, well, that's not too long
No,
then.
no, only about 7 months.
Yeah. I understand you're from this area, not necessarily Algoma, but pretty nearby.
Yeah, so I grew up in the town of Ledgeview and went to high school in De Pere, the East De Pere School District, before going to St. Norbert College for my undergraduate studies,
Uh-huh.
where I studied political science and history. And then while I was there, interned for Brown County. So really, my roots are in the Green Bay area and Brown County. And then after graduating and having that internship with the county there, graduating St. Norbert, I went to grad school to pursue my master's in public administration in Northern Illinois University,
Oh,
which is
in DeKalb.
in DeKalb. Yep,
Mhm.
exactly.
Right.
Yeah, viewers may be familiar with the DeKalb Corn Company. That's their claim to fame. So I was down there studying to get my master's degree in Northern Illinois, and then I was also working for the city of DeKalb during that time, first as an intern, and then upon graduation, was promoted to a full-time position as a management analyst there in the city manager's office. Um, did that for about a year until an opportunity in the village of Bellevue up here opened up. So I jumped on that opportunity and was fortunate enough to get a job there as the assistant to the village administrator in Bellevue.
That's very good training, I would think, for what you're doing.
Yeah, it was. Obviously, the village of Bellevue, it's a smaller community than the city of DeKalb, but it allowed me to get more experience, a broader experience in various departments within the village, and particularly allowed me to, in kind of a way, refamiliarize myself with my home area in the Green Bay area from the perspective of a government official. So obviously my experience prior to that had just been as a resident, and now I was becoming reintroduced to Green Bay almost, in the Green Bay area, and in Wisconsin for that matter, from a more government perspective, and seeing those differences and kind of seeing how things worked from that perspective. So we worked there in that position for about 3.5 years. And saw the opportunity here in Algoma and applied, and obviously that went pretty well.
Yeah.
So really excited to be here. You know, when I saw the opening, it seemed like a good fit. You know, I had knowledge of Algoma. I'm not from the immediate area here, but as I alluded to earlier, I'm you know, not too far down the road. And I'd been to Algoma a number of times. Obviously, you know, kind of being at the foot of Door County, my family would frequently take trips out here. We would frequently go up the lake side as opposed to going up the bay side.
Sure.
You know, we would stop here in Algoma to either stop and get some fish or some wine on our way up the peninsula. So I saw the opportunity. I saw the job description. You know, being a smaller community, again, I felt like it would give me an opportunity to be more involved with some of the more hands-on stuff. And so, you know, I applied for it, and I spoke with some of the staff before and after and during the interview process, and here we are.
How are you enjoying it? Has it been everything that you'd hoped for and more?
Well, obviously, this has been kind of an interesting year. You know, I had about one full solid month under my belt before we obviously had everything going on here with COVID-19. That being said, it's been a very positive experience. I've been really happy so far. You know, I can't speak for the staff and the council. I like to think that they're pretty happy with things so far too. But no, I mean, it's been a very good experience. It has been very much what I expected, with more hands-on in the day-to-day activities, and definitely being more visible in the community than I'm used to. coming from larger communities, which is not a bad thing by any means. It's just something a little different to get used to.
Yeah.
But COVID-19 notwithstanding, yeah, it's been a very positive experience so far.
What a great way to start, though. I mean, if you're going to have anything go wrong.
Yeah, it was kind of, I was reflecting on that, both shortly when it happened and kind of ever since then, that, it's an interesting experience, I'm sure, for anyone, but I think particularly as not only, brand new here, but honestly, being a first-time administrator myself, previously, if something like this would happen, I would always have someone to, higher up the food chain. And now, obviously, I do have the council and the mayor here. Yeah, kind of being, at the chief administrative official during a very uncertain times has been interesting. But again, we have a good staff here and a supportive council and mayor. So, by all accounts and appearances, we seem to be doing quite well, all things considered.
Good. I think that's one of the kind of fun things and exciting, maybe, I don't know, but living in a community, the size of Algoma, and getting to know, who the fire chief is and who the police chief is and, who the mayor is and the city administrator and the head librarian. I think that's kind of special, and it's something that you don't experience in a big city. So, good. I'm glad things are going well for you. Let's talk a little bit about what's going on as far as the city of Algoma is concerned. It seems as though one of the big news stories, and even the television stations in Green Bay were covering it, is work that's going on at Crescent Beach having to do with the stormwater outfall. How is that going, and what are you trying to do there?
Yeah, so for some time before I came on board, the city had been pursuing some funding and grants to improve our stormwater drainage into Lake Michigan. So basically, right now, our stormwater, which is, for those who don't know, is basically just a way of saying urban runoff, meaning it's sort of all the water that gets into the environment that's not coming from a polluter, a specific polluter. So in other words, it's your rainfall that's getting on the roads and on lawns and washing into the storm drains and then out, in our case, to Lake Michigan. So right now it's just draining straight to Lake Michigan sort of as is. Washes off people's lawns, on the roads, goes in the drain straight into the lake. The city pursued grants both from the Fund for Lake Michigan, which is a nonprofit organization, and the United States Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA. The city received about $400,000 in grants. So what we're doing is we're using that money to basically re-divert the stormwater from where it's currently going at Crescent Beach. It's going to be diverted a little bit more towards a little bit north of there, right by the youth club. Mm-hmm. And what the news broadcast, as you alluded to, sort of highlighted yesterday, is they're currently tearing up some of the area there. They're creating what's known as a bioretention area, and it's going to look very similar to, say, like a nature prairie. So it's going to have your native plants and grasses in there. And basically the way to think about it is the stormwater is going to filter into a smaller bioretention area and then filter into a bigger one. And what these do is they naturally filter out some of those, the stormwater runoff. So the things that you'll commonly find in there that are pollutants, such as fertilizers from people's lawns, salt, and other what's called total suspended solids. And these bioretention areas will basically act as a filter, and then from there it goes into Lake Michigan. The idea is that you're filtering out a lot of those harmful chemicals or total suspended solids that decrease the water quality in our case Lake Michigan. So a lot of people will notice not so great appearing and foul smelling algae, for example. Mm-hmm. It's called Cladophora, right. And that is that's promulgated from particularly phosphorus, which is a common ingredient in fertilizers and other such substances. It's naturally occurring, but in high doses, just like anything else, when you have too much of something, then in this case the algae blooms beyond control, and that decreases your water quality both from a sight perspective, a smell perspective. It saps the water of oxygen, which is obviously bad for the fish. So our hope is that by cleaning the water, not only is it just better for the environment, but it'll result in a cleaner beach, and as a result, people will be able to enjoy it more. Obviously, the beach is one of, if not the city of Algoma's greatest assets.
Sure.
So anything we can do to protect that is really what we're striving for.
Now, let me, so I understand it better. When it goes into these first two ponds before it goes into the lake, will you go through there like in a year or two and dig all that stuff up and throw it away somewhere, or does it just settle down?
I don't know the specifics of it. I do believe that every on a certain interval we will have to clean it out in some capacity. I don't know exactly. I have to admit I don't know exactly what that.
Well,
will
that's
look
why
like.
you hire the
Yeah.
experts. That's your
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, but I do know that yes, there is some maintenance required with that. The analogy I use is no different than like putting a filter on, like in your kitchen, right? When you filter the water in your refrigerator, it's kind of like the water's already been, gone through, the municipal system and into your house, but you put that filter on the end before you
Sure.
ultimately consume it. But you have to change the filter once in a while. So we will have to maintain the native flora that'll be in there with mowings, I think, every 2 or 3 years. But as far as actually removing everything else, I don't know the specifics. I just know that it will be done.
Yeah. So the flora that will be there is actually growing in the water, or is it going to be on the kind of on the side of the pond?
So, yeah, I guess I should clarify. This is really intended, this is actually going to be it's called a bioretention area or a pond, but it's really a dry area.
Oh,
so
okay.
it's only going to be wet when the stormwater is draining into it, or if we have an event where the lake levels get too high. But I mean, the things that'll be in there, we're talking, like black-eyed Susans, wild flowers and plants like that. So, ones you'd more commonly associate like with a prairie.
Yeah.
That's what's going to be.
That's going to be a real attraction then. It's not just going, oh, look, that's where all the dirty water goes. That's going to be something that will be attractive and natural. That's a wonderful thing.
Yeah, that's our hope.
Yeah. I know I'm work with Crossroads up in Door County, and they have done quite a bit of that with swales, and the water is drained from the parking lot and goes into a swale, and then that clears the water up. So I think you're working in what's happening in the environment in so many areas. You'll see a number of beaches. I know, that are around Kewaunee and Door County, where they've planted natural grasses and that sort of thing to avoid all of that water going into the bay or the lake.
Yep.
So that's a good thing.
Yep.
It sounds like you're coming along pretty good on that. Now, I know that there was some discussion previously about some redevelopment. To be more specific, it's in Area 2. But can you kind of tell us where Area 2 is and what's going on with the redevelopment?
Yeah, so Redevelopment Area 2 refers to the block by the Denny's Supermarket grocery store in between the grocery store and Perry Park. So it's bordered by 5th and 6th Streets to the east and west respectively, and then by Steele to the north and Clark to the south. It's a distressed block for the most part, meaning there are several blighted properties there. And what the city is looking to do is, by designating it a redevelopment area, we are applying for, have applied for, and will be applying for community development block grant funding. So we are applying for 2 grants, totaling about $1.7 million. So 680,000 of that is what's known as closed grant funding, and that is in partnership with the county. And if we had more time, I could go into much more detail about that, but that's a discussion for another day. But that money is air quotes set aside for the city of Algoma to use for this project. The remainder of it, $1 million, is in the form of a competitive grant through CDBG, or the Community Development Block Grant. And that we applied for that this year. Unfortunately, we did not get it. As much as I hate to admit it, it was more due to error than on our part than it was on anything about the merits or lack thereof of the project.
Let me tell you, I don't know much about grants because I've never written a grant, but the comments that I get from people and how difficult grant writing can be, I wouldn't feel too bad.
Well, yeah, I mean, we certainly, we reflected on it, and we know what we have to. I mean, the good news is we can reapply, and we know what we did wrong, so we know what to do to fix it. And because we know we have a very worthwhile project, we're very confident that we just got to clean up those details. And then when we reapply, which we'll be reapplying in May of next year for that competitive grant, we're very confident about our odds to receive money and probably the full amount. So, $1.7 million, we can do a lot with that. So what we're looking to do specifically is, with a couple of exceptions, with specific properties on that block, buying up some of the distressed, or really all of the distressed properties, and then raising them, while in the meantime having a developer come in, and as one of the requirements of the CDBG grant, we would look to replace at least 51% of that housing with what's known as low to moderate income housing. So that would include, and part of our redevelopment project contemplates this, is a mixture of smaller apartment buildings, duplexes, townhomes, and the idea, we would phase that in to kind of not do it all at once, but it would really provide a more natural transition from what we have now, because that block is right on the border with the central business district of the downtown. So it would provide a more natural transition instead of just right now where it's downtown commercial and then boom, single family housing. You would have apartments on the east side of the block on the downtown side, and then transition that to smaller, your townhomes and duplexes as you get closer to the park, and then that transitions into your single family neighborhood and the rest of the community. So, it's really to help provide working class housing, which is another thing that we're, I think we really want to focus on here in the city, not just with this project, but just kind of big picture. I think there's a philosophy out there that focusing on housing is really the preferred route to go for economic development, because jobs follow people, businesses follow people. So you have more people, you're more likely to have a new business come in, and if you're focusing on working class housing, they have a labor market there. So we're trying to appeal to the demographic that's still in the workforce, and will be able to work any potential new jobs that might come into the city.
I know one of the complaints that I've always heard, or not always heard, but for the last few years, with real estate, is that there's such a shortage of rentals. And so many people say, well, I'd love to work in Algoma, or I'd love to work, in one of these communities in the area, but I can't find a place to live. So with people that perhaps either can't afford to buy a home at this point, or who are in that situation in life where they want to have an apartment, or a townhouse or whatever, you're really going to provide them with a lot of opportunity here. And so that sounds like a pretty good plan.
Yeah, we thought so too. So now it's just a matter of executing those fine details on the grant application and getting those monies available.
Yeah. Well, between Crescent Beach and building, more housing and so on, it sounds like you've got your hands full. So
Yeah,
That's-
keeping me busy.
that's a good thing.
Yep.
Obviously, you're not just attuned to doing some of these dramatic jobs. I'm sure that there's a lot of things that you have to do, I guess you'd say internally, working with government officials and that sort of thing. What's a typical day look like, or a typical week, or is there nothing like that?
No, there is such a thing as a typical week. It is government, so there is some routine items. One of the benefits of my position, though, is that it is a little more varied than I think people might initially realize. So, my job really focuses on a lot of the internal things like you mentioned. So, for example, we recently wrapped up and ratified an agreement with our police union. So we worked on our negotiations with them and have a new contract in place to take effect with the new year. We've also looked at some other things such as our employee pay scale and things of that nature, employee compensation. Right now it's budget time, so we're looking at just about everything under the sun, anything that the city's involved with. And then another thing that we're looking at is I'm sorry, I'm drawing a blank here.
No, that's okay.
No, another part of my typical week is a lot of times I'll receive zoning questions. So I serve as the city's zoning administrator.
Oh, okay.
So when someone has a question about what they can build or place on their property, or if they want to expand their property at all, they have any questions. If it's a building code question, then that goes to the building inspector. But if it's more about the land use and the zoning, that's something that I look into. So I pretty frequently receive questions that I have to go to the code and check. Most often it's like, well, can I build a shed here in my backyard? And if I do, how far does it have to be from the property lines, and how big can it be, and all that sort of
And
stuff.
how far away from the alley does it have to be? And what about my neighbor
Yeah.
who's?
Yep, and then you always get the question of like, well, how come that person got to do it and I don't? And so then you've got to explain the ins and outs of a specific circumstance. So, but that being said, it is so in that sense, there is a typical week, but even within that, it's pretty different because no two properties are the same. For an example, with the zoning, so. I mean, the zoning code is the same for everyone, but no two properties are identical. So
Yes.
everyone faces slightly different challenges, and it's working with them on that.
Good. Well, I get the same questions, but now I know who to turn to.
Yeah. hmm
Yeah, I keep trying to, come up with an answer, but just talk to the zoning people. That would be pretty good. You were mentioning about the budget, and I know a lot of people, just look at it as, oh, well, the budget just kind of comes together. How do you specifically do that? Do you meet with each department head? Are you the chief person, or does the mayor do that, or is it just kind of combined? How do you come up with a budget?
That's a good question. It varies a lot depending on the organization. Generally, it's not quite as simple as an average member of the public might think it is. So the public will see the part where the staff will bring it before the elected body, in our case the city council, for review and make any changes, and then we have our public hearing, and then it's adopted. But what the public often doesn't see or doesn't know about is what goes on in the months before that. So we've now for a few months already been starting on this process. And first, it depends on what philosophy the organization implements, but what I asked the staff here to do was back in June already, going and looking at, what are your priorities for next year? What do you want to accomplish? And then you start with sort of, your vision of what you want to do, and then we determine, okay, well, how much is that going to cost? Is that realistic? And then you start paring it down from there, and that involves, first they meet with the department heads will meet with the treasurer. She's ultimately the one putting the budget together. It's ultimately I'm the one who's responsible for it and bringing it to the council for consideration, but she's really the one doing, she's the one doing most of the legwork with it
Okay.
as the treasurer.
Mhm.
So the department heads will go to her with their information, and then her and I go over that. You know, she says, well, here's what it's looking at, you know, the budget, we're looking at an increase of X number of dollars. That's not really realistic. If we want to try and keep taxes at a minimal increase or no increase, we need to cut this many dollars. And then we start looking at, okay, if we're going to make these cuts, you know, where do we make them? And then that's when we start having, you know, the discussions internally. And this is all before bringing it to the council. And then the
Mhm.
council ultimately makes the decisions on if they want to make any more cuts, if there's something they want to change or add, if they want to move projects up or move them back. We also look at our capital expenses. So we have what's known as a capital improvement plan. It's a 5-year plan looking out at our major capital expenses. So road repairs and maintenance, in our case, sanitary, sewer laterals. We look at, you know, just large equipment, so vehicles, that sort of stuff. So large, big ticket items, in other words, so to speak. So, and that's all what we've done so far. We haven't even met with the council yet. So
Mhm.
that's coming up later this month, where they're going to have an opportunity then to go over our proposed budget, and then they'll make the changes that they want to see fit, and then we'll do what we got to do to make that work.
So they have to have meetings too, the
Yes.
city council
Mhm.
does, I'm sure,
Yep.
to get there. Do you have any long-term, well, you mentioned, yeah, we have long-term goals. Anything major out there that you're kind of looking at?
I mean, the big one that we always hear about, both from residents and elected officials, is roads. And
Mhm.
so, you know, right now, we plan for doing certain roads, you know, looking down the road,
Looking down the road,
looking
yes.
down the road
That's good.
at the roads. And that's largely a cooperative effort, though, with the utility. So, for example, some people might wonder, well, why isn't my road being done? It's clearly in bad condition. Well, we coordinate a lot of that with the Algoma utility, because, you know, we'll plan because we only have so many dollars. We can't do all the roads. So we have to be very smart about how we do that. And the utility, you know, we kind of wait to see what the work they're going to do. Like, so for example, on their water utilities. So if they have to go in and do work on a water line, a water main, then we'll plan on doing the road after that, because it doesn't make much sense to completely, you know, redo a
Yes.
road only to rip it up to work on the water.
Didn't they just put that road in last
Right,
year? And
exactly. So, you know, our you know, back to your question though about, you know, our long range planning is really what I'm trying to work us towards, is getting us to a place where we have more of how do I put it, a more defined policy
Mhm.
as far as how we determine which roads get done and when, and trying to improve the coordination with the utility, and so that, you know, we can better communicate too, because ultimately that's really what we're trying to accomplish here, is by having a finite plan and policy in place, it helps the public to understand where we're going and why we're doing it, more importantly. So while yes, your road may not be in the best of conditions, but you know, your neighbor, you know, 3 blocks down the road, their road's just as bad, but theirs is getting done because their water line also has to be replaced. And you know, just working on making more, like I said, more bona fide policies and plans, so that it helps direct us and guide us from a planning perspective, but also the public understand what we're doing and why we do what we do.
Yeah, I remember before, and I, years and years ago, I was on the school board in Sturgeon Bay. And before I got on there, everything was, well, why don't they do this? Why don't they do that? And when you actually get involved with government, I think it opens your eyes considerably, and you go, oh, that's why it works that way. So I'm sure that through your education and through your knowledge and your experiences, that you've probably discovered that pretty clearly, and that that the general public, if they were in on all of the meetings and everything, they'd understand it, but it's easy to be sometimes critical of, what's going on here. If you really knew the inner workings and probably attended every single meeting that ever
Yeah.
came along, you'd know that, but, people have their own things to do, so that's why we rely on people such as yourself.
Yeah, I mean, that's exactly why we are in the roles that we are, is to serve the public and to do so in their best interests. And, I think a lot of times people might have some misconceptions about government and government employees specifically about what it is we do, or more commonly the complaint of what we don't do. But again, I think you kind of alluded to it there was, there's just a lot going on behind the scenes that, people see the end result, and especially if they don't agree with the end result, they tend to be kind of critical of government and government employees. But, I always try and stress to people, when you're involved with it, and we only have so much money. And we live in a particularly, from a local government perspective, live in a particularly challenging state because they have what's known as levy limits in place that don't allow the local governments or county governments to exceed a certain increase in their property taxes, which, I realize the goal of it and the merit of it is to prevent, people from getting taxed out of control. But there is a drawback to that, and that it very tightly restricts our ability to as effectively repair roads and respond to complaints, because we are dealing with a smaller amount of money, and our flexibility to raise money and pay for these services is restricted. You can have a debate all day long about, is that good, is it bad? It all depends on your perspective, and that's fine. But it is ultimately the reality of the situation we're in. So, in kind of one way, though, I kind of appreciate the challenge, because it does present an extra kind of a hurdle to have to clear. So we have to do more with less resources, and it's, it can be challenging and frustrating at times, but at the end of the day, it's something I personally rather enjoy, is trying to solve the problem.
Sure.
So,
And if people have questions, they can call you, right?
Yep.
Okay,
Oh, yeah.
you're in the book.
Yep. Oh, yeah, I'm here. Yep.
Okay. Well, that's going to do it for our show today. It went by pretty quick. It always seems to, but it sure has been fun, Jared. We've been speaking with Jared Heyn. He's the Algoma City Administrator, and he's been here since the first part of 2020. And we thank you so much, and we hope you'll come back and talk to us again.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Okay, thanks very much. That's going to do it for our show for today, and one of these days maybe we'll be able to take these masks off. I don't know. We'll see. But it's been a lot of fun being here today. That's going to do it for our program today for your city, your county. I'm Bob Gray. Thank you so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time. So long, everybody.